Hello, dear audience, listening, looking to the next 15 minutes of Dr. Pruimboom. It's an important day today because of the fact that if we look to the numbers of the people suffering from infection in Holland, that went down. The Canary Islands, the Baleares, they're open again for tourists. And so things are improving, which is a very good thing, I think, worldwide, because we are all fed up about this pandemia, the virus, who holds us in claws without the possibility to move around, to have social interaction, and to enjoy life as we would like to enjoy it. So I would talk about today about this thing, about social interaction, about emotions, about thoughts, cognitive things, which influences our health in a very, very, very important way. I think everybody knows that fear and anger could affect our heart frequency, the way we breathe, the way we feel. And years ago, this was still something very abstract. I remember a paper of Bernard Spiegel in 1989, where he was the first one publishing the impact of a purpose of life treatment in women suffering from breast cancer. And the outcome of the study was fantastic. Yeah. What came out is that those engaging in that intervention lived an average of 19 months more than the control group. Obvious, that study produced an incredible conflict because of the fact that the explanation of why it worked was afterwards not supported by new studies. It seemed as if it was by positive thinking about optimism. So the hypothesis was that optimism, positive thinking, could protect us or help us to cure cancer, and afterwards it came out that there was no support for that hypothesis. Today we are 30 years further. We have much better measure instruments. We can show the activity of the brain. We can show the activity of tumors much more better than before, and we can visualize emotions and thoughts at the level of the wetware in our brain. It's perhaps an interesting word, wetware. Perhaps you would have expected that I would have said hardware together with software, as if our brain would work like an artificial intelligence, like a computer. But gradually it's becoming clear that that's not true. If you look at the amount of energy our brain uses to process 10 high 11 information units every second, and the cost of that effort is only 9 watts, then it's very difficult to explain that in neuroanatomy, in macrobiology and microbiology, because if you just look to the biggest computer ever built, a Japanese computer, which has tried to imitate the way the brain functions, it needed 40 minutes, yeah, of hard work, using 9 megawatts. You can imagine that is the amount of energy with which you could provide energy to a small village, to imitate only 1 second of the way the human brain works. So the human brain cannot only function at the level of micro and macro biology. The explanation for those capacities are at the level of nanobiology, quantum biology, and quantum means amount, and we talk about nanometers. So gradually it's becoming clear that the way the brain functions has got to do with mitochondrial capacities to travel from cell to cell by a tunnel, but mitochondria also travel through media like the bloodstream. This is very new, but there are really mitochondrial extracellularly in between cells in the bloodstream, and they transfer energy. And the question should be, why would this happen? Why would there be migrating mitochondria from cell to cell, from neuron to neuron, and even from body part to other body parts? And that is gradually one of the things we are studying in clinical P&I, because there is more than macro connections by axons and dendrites. There is more than micro connections with hormones and cytokines. There's even one lower or higher layer, which is nano connections, tunnels, traveling of all kind of organelles, which means that the connection between all parts of the human body, and not only the human body, probably all organisms in the world, is much more complex and much more needed to understand than we have ever thought. And that's how we came and we come to the probability that emotions, thoughts, and social injustices could also be communicated not only by micro and macrobiology, but also by nanobiology. Which means that if we understand what happens, we probably have the explanation why training purpose of life in people suffering chronic diseases can really help people in prevention, in protection, and perhaps even in curing. Anyway, what is clear that nowadays we know that emotions have definitely influence on the way our immune system functions, on the way our brain functions, definitely. And gradually it's becoming clear that this has got to do with a lot of cytokines, a lot of hormones, neurotransmitters, because we know that neurons, they express receptors for immune transmitters. Immune cells, they express receptors for neurotransmitters, and both type of cells express receptors for hormones. So everything is connected, and there is not a single doubt about that. But now the thing is, what is really important? Is it about positivity, or is it by preventing negativity? Because that's a big difference. People perhaps think that's the same thing, but that's not true, because it's completely different to say, "Oh, I'm going to cure myself," and that would be a curing trigger. And there's no support for that. But there is a big evidence that if you treat negative, toxic emotions, if you treat negative, toxic thoughts, if you reframe social injustice, then you see that has impact on the prognosis of a lot of chronic diseases. So we really talk about negativity and not positivity. We have to reframe negativity. It's very different to say fear is something which produces illness, but fear protects against infections. It's completely normal. It's completely normal that in the actual pandemia, people are afraid of being infected. That fearness means that we take care, we maintain distance, etc. But it does not necessarily mean that it would damage the way our immune system functions. It's the other way around. If you reframe fear in something which is a necessity, a normal protective emotion, then the immune system responds with a better protection against pathogens. So it's not about let's be positive. No, it's just about let's change the hypothesis and just think of one very easy thing to understand. If everybody can feel emotions and meta emotions, those emotions developed evolutionary with a certain kind of protective effect. Because otherwise, evolution would have eliminated those emotions out of our consciousness. So if we can feel it, there is something behind it which can be profitable. It doesn't mean it is positive, but it's profitable. You call that reframing. And that is about thoughts. It's about everything. If you have to reframe the world you live in, because it's not that bad. It is not that bad that a virus vaccine protects 93%. That is very good if you compare that with a vaccine against the flu. It is very good. It's very good that people can feel, can think, and if you reframe those, something happens incredibly. Then in the brain, the things you thought were negative and now are reframed as something profitable, which is not positive but profitable, then the very interesting thing is that in the brain, things already change without a need to add a medicine. So if the brain understands, if the brain recognizes, if the brain changes its way to a way of looking at things, what is incredible is that mitochondria start to migrate between neurons, between parts of the brain, and incredible, and energy is increased, and with energy, intelligence. So yes, emotions, thoughts, and all kinds of things happening in our consciousness influence the brain instantly, and with the brain, the immune system. And with the immune system and the brain in charge, then you can control your autonomic systems, which are not autonomic anymore. We know that autonomic systems like the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous systems, are not only influenced negatively or influenced autonomically by emotions, they are controllable by cognition. So it's not true that they are autonomic anymore. They are definitely controllable by the way you think, the way you behave, in the way you sense the world. I thank you a lot for your attention, and I hope to see you next week again. Thank you very much.